the last part. Facing challenges to the resurrection account. And that's a simple screen. So we'll do a bit of free flow sort of conversation based on that. Things in that screen. What kinds of challenges, main challenges, have surfaced in regards to the resurrection account? One family of challenges I don't want to deal with right now, because they are really going to be dealt with in another module. And that is in regards to the canon. Which books do we consider? I'm going to give just a simple point right now, which is we have solid reasons to say what we have in the New Testament are the only authoritative books corresponding to the disciples' witness accounts. And this we understand through a few different historical artifacts, including Muratorian canon and so on. So the canon-related argument we're going to deal with in a separate module, and that's a deep module. And at that time we'll be dealing with manuscriptal variants and so on, related information also. But for now we're going to stick to a simple template. Apart from the canon, what kinds of families of arguments have been advanced? Well, the third one, well, other explanations are possible. Well, what explanation? People have suggested a few already, but beyond that they'd only say, well, maybe there are others. Maybe I can construct a complex case, and so on. So people have tried. Let's look at a few different such other possible explanations. One of which actually was raised as a question towards the end of the previous session. That's one area, one kind of challenge. Let's see if that challenge holds water. Another kind of challenge is perhaps the disciples weren't reliable witnesses. People can bring that up again, because of course challenges are not necessarily always rational. Even if you made a rational point already, people can still reiterate the same stuff over and over again. So people can bring that up. Another major area people have tried to advance. There exists other dying and rising messiahs. Remember I said death, burial, resurrection. If the resurrection is true, everything else falls in place. And that is where some people have really understood that. And they have tried to use all sorts of other examples where they portray people of legions of people corresponding to religions of Indian origin, religions of Egyptian origin, Persian origin, Roman origin, all sorts of religions. And they say, oh, wait a second, we have a similar character there. How about this one? He also seems to have died and come back alive. So why do you think Jesus is special and so on? That's another kind of argument. And the other kind of argument which I want to briefly touch upon today, although the comprehensive dealing on that would again be in the module dealing with manuscripts and canon. And that is perhaps the documents that we have are not reliable enough. Yeah? So 4 different things. Let's go, maybe the first one first, please. Documents are unreliable. And this is sort of the particular argument I'd really like to focus on briefly today is the kind of argument that people like Bart Ehrman advances. What is his argument? His argument is New Testament manuscripts have variant readings. We have multiple copies. We have thousands of copies of the Gospels and so on. And there are variations certainly across different copies. So his point is, oh, wait a second, if there are plenty of variants, how do we trust this? Which seems like a very innocent and logically sound argument to make, unless we look into the details. So his point is, how do we trust? We really can't, it's very hard to trust, and therefore I would not trust, is his argument. Documents are unreliable purely based on the manuscriptal variants. And that's the only thing I'm focusing today, not the canon, just to be clear. Now, what is the the arguments, here is where I really like Hyde Park-like debates. With people like Bart Ehrman and everyone else, I really think it's very important for Christians, of course, to be kind to the other person we are discussing with, but to also expose silly ideas for what they really are, as silly ideas. And unless we do that, we don't respect them, love them properly. So we really need to expose these things properly. And one of the things is Bart Ehrman unfortunately hasn't so far debated, in my knowledge. I haven't watched all of his debates, but some of his debates that I watched, he hasn't debated a person who really has taken him to task. Almost everyone has taken him to task in terms of the arguments, but I haven't found anyone taking him to task in terms of exposing arguments for what they really are through sarcasm and so on. Like things, are you really saying this? Sort of thing, if you see what I mean. So my point there is precisely this. The point that I'm going to present right now is not my own point. I'm careful listening to someone essentially gives this point, and this came up in a debate with Bart Ehrman, except he really didn't use the tone properly, so the point wasn't, I don't think would have been registered properly by everyone. And the point is this: yes, of course there are manuscriptal variants. That is very true. Manuscriptal variants, we Christians are the ones who are exposing them. It's not as if we're trying to hide the manuscriptal variants. And we don't, it's not a huge problem for us. God never said I'm going to make sure everyone who writes a copy writes in a proper way. That's not a guarantee that God gave, and therefore we are employing normal means to make sure we are getting as much content as possible. So manuscriptal variants, existence of them is true, but the very, very important point is this: we already know of the kinds of texts, what we call family of texts. I'm going to mention only briefly today terms like the Western text, Byzantine text, received text, textus receptus, and so on. So you find categories of text. Well, what do they really mean? For those who are not very clued up on this particular area, the idea is manuscripts are variants, but they're not random variants. They seem to follow a pattern. It seems like it's very likely that a copy made somewhere was either had mistakes inadvertently and propagated those mistakes later on purely because that copy was the one which was used for making further copies. Or it's also possible in some places people who are copying weren't really Christians, dedicated in the way Christians should be, and they also had interesting ideas that they can manage, manipulate and so on, and could have changed things. That's also possible. But regardless of all that, we see a pattern, and the pattern means we have a few different families of different variants which manuscripts fall into. So let's say if we take the last decade or so of new findings of manuscriptal fragments or even entire manuscripts, which is by the way happening if not on a day-to-day basis, on a fairly regular basis. There is a website, I think called NSTCM or something, I can't remember exactly at the top of my mind, I need to check here, but essentially there is a research group whose sole focus is collecting manuscripts, taking digital copies of them, cataloguing them, and making information about them available online through their website. New Testament, something I've forgotten the name now, but CSNTM. CSNTM is the name of the website, and that's a very good website. That's also sort of an authoritative website in terms of getting these copies. But the point is this: we know families of manuscripts, and new manuscripts which are found are not deviating much away from the existing families. In other words, texts that we have for the Gospels, for the things that we used to come with the conclusions, are already, text is already converging. They're not diverging, converging. In other words, the point would be, yes, there are variants, but we now seem to know all sorts of possible variants. And therefore, look at all the variants that you want to look at, and you would still see the case that we made to be true. Do you see what I'm saying? The variants are not impacting the argument that we're making at all. Yeah, that is the crucial part. So, when Bhajan says, oh, there are variants and therefore I give up, we only say, oh, if there are variants, you better do your homework even better. Spend even more time. That's what you've been paid for. You're an academician, so you better do this properly. Text is converging, so no problem in that regard. To claim documents unreliable is just wrong. I personally don't prefer all the families of text in the New Testament. I don't personally, for some particular reason, but I won't get into that right now. But the fact of the matter is, individuals can have preferences for the family of text that they think is really close to what was written down as the Word of God in its autograph. You can have preferences, but even if you ignore those preferences, to claim that it's unreliable is just making a fool of yourself. It's all there, text is converging, you better get on with our lives with dealing with the text properly. Okay, that's in regards to that particular argument. Second one, there exists dying and other dying and rising messiahs. And in the book here, I've essentially dealt with this as a brief appendix. For people who are here, you get copies of this book. I've got some spare copies today. And for people who are watching online, we need to fairly soon, both on Sopa and Operation Stephen, we need to find a way to fairly soon pass copies of this book to you also. But I've written an appendix here, Appendix C, a note on Jesus' life and pagan myths, bringing together some expert comments based on what we find in pagan mythology. In pagan ideas. First point to make. In terms of logically sound argument, whether there exist other people of a similar nature or not is irrelevant. If Jesus died and came back alive, whether some other Tom, Dick and Harry had tea this morning or took shower earlier today, none of those things are relevant. You see what I'm saying? The case that we've made here is independent of any other myth. That's first thing to remember. If Jesus died and came back alive, he ought to be taken seriously. He seems to know what it takes to give life, to have life after you are dead. And therefore we better listen to him carefully. Whether you have other sources or not is immaterial. You might have, might not have, to begin with. That's point number one. Yeah, so far with me. Point number two, and the other points are what I'd really like to read from what I've written here. Having said that, just for completeness sake, it would be worthwhile to point out that when we get to the details of the lives of the pagan deities, of which we have a few, I've listed a few here: Osiris, Attis, Dionysus, Mithras, Adonis, Tammuz, Hercules, Romulus, Apollonius, Apollonius of Tyana, and Empedocles. A few different deities of Roman origin, Persian origin, Median origin, and so on. Tammuz is Canaanite origin, and so on. So you have a few different things here. But the point is, it would be worthwhile to point out that when we get to the details of the lives of the pagan deities, we would find many glaring holes in the argument of similarity with the life of Jesus. For starters, none of these pagan deities is even remotely qualified to be called a historical person. Who, in what point in time, advanced doctrine about Osiris as a historical doctrine? I saw him arrive, I've come here to testify of him, you better become Osirinians. Osirinians. Not Christians, but Osirinians. You see what I'm saying? At no point in time at the origin of these ideas, let me just stick to a neutral term here. These ideas, did people go around claiming these ideas to be historically valid? People are claiming today. I'm talking about the origin and later, before today. I'm not talking about the last couple of decades. I'm talking about prior to that. How many did that? No one. So no one really intended this to be a historical story. So none of this is even remotely qualified to be called a historical person. Furthermore, the deaths and the resurrections of all these deities, by the way, which I've listed earlier, of all these deities are in no way like the regular death of Jesus on the cross and a bodily resurrection without unwanted embellishment. With Jesus, what we're talking about is a proper resurrection. You die, and the same word, and the body comes back alive. If you go through all these pagan myths, there's one more point which I'd like to make in a minute, but if you go through all these pagan myths, ignoring the period at which they began to be spread around as myths, not as historical accounts, as myths, what you would find is they were mostly introduced as agriculture-related myths. Oh, now it's a harvest season, now it's a sowing season and so on. So that's where the spring and so on. So that's where you have we have the God dying now and he's rising back again. And he does that on a yearly basis. And now he's dying again, now he comes back alive. And if it rains and if it's not amenable for doing proper agriculture in that year, you might think, oh, the God isn't happy with us for some reason or whatever. That's the kind of idea conveyed in these dying and rising myths. Nothing to do with, I have seen Jesus, nothing to do anything like what we say with Jesus. I saw this man, he died in human observation. He was buried in a regular tomb, and the tomb is empty now. You see the difference? And the other ideas are just purely fantasies about agricultural seasons and imagination of God's association with those agricultural seasons. So regular death of Jesus on the cross and bodily resurrection, that's not comparable to this. Finally, in some cases it would even be difficult to argue that some elements of the mythologies of these deities even predate Jesus. It's very, very hard. If you do your research on these dying and rising gods and so on, they are very, very late sources of claims that they existed beforehand, for which we don't have any evidence. So when was this idea cooked up and began to be communicated? Based on evidence, if you stick to evidences, it will be really hard to say this God predates Jesus at all. Having said that, I'm willing to concede that there is a tiny chance, I think there is a chance, not in a way similar to Jesus, but in slightly different ways, similar ideas have been conveyed in the past. And there are particular reasons for that. This is where I go back to the... but for people to establish that today would be really hard. If you want a clue as to what you can use to establish such an argument, I'll tell you the clue, and that is the Bible. The Bible, when the women came to Peter and they said, we saw him alive, Peter said, this sounded to, I think the writer says it sounded to him like idle tales. Apparently implying there were tales like that which were around. If you see what... So the Bible is the only place you can come to, but of course if you come there, you better take Jesus seriously before you get to anything else in any level of seriousness. In other words, pagan deities historically, in a credible manner, to establish them as somewhat similar to Jesus is just wishful thinking, doesn't work. If we apply the rigor that we apply to Jesus, and which we have, and also similar studies with the Old Testament. If you apply that level of rigor, you won't find convincing arguments with regards to the higher deities. Okay, perhaps they weren't, let me go to the fourth one first and then come back to the third one. Perhaps they weren't reliable witnesses. Okay, interesting. Why were they willing to die? What is your definition of weren't reliable? If they were willing to die, they were convicted enough. When I say reliable, weren't convicted enough. They were willing to die, so what's your problem? That's the definition of conviction. I'm willing to stand by what I say. What's your problem? That's the primary argument, which we've already made. Now, the reason I put that here is to make some secondary arguments. And the secondary arguments are things like, okay, let's for a moment pretend they weren't reliable witnesses. But who made the tomb empty? Wishful thinking or lying doesn't make the tomb empty. The Romans were on the case. They had 3-level protection. You can't imagine a body out of a tomb. It doesn't work that way. So, whether they're reliable or not, we found, we earlier saw that the conviction was real as per witness accounts. And on top of that, for anyone to make any further argument would just be ridiculing their own position, if you see what I mean. Tombs don't go empty. So once that has been shown, no one should really be even attempting to make that point. Now, other explanations are possible. I'll give a few examples. There was a question at the end of last session. The question was, could Jesus' disciples have stolen the body? Well, the answer is, okay, let's consider that. Could Jesus' disciples have stolen the body? Okay, yes, let's say for a moment, yes, they could have. How did the Romans not know about it? They were guarding that place. How can you come and steal when the Roman guard was there with a 3-level protection at the tomb? For problem number 1. Are you saying simpletons, fishermen, and so on came and fooled a very sophisticated military apparatus? That's point number 1. Point number 2 is what we saw in the table. Okay, they fooled, they stole. Why were they willing to die for what they didn't know to be not true? You see what I'm saying? If they knew when they were lying about the resurrection, why would this happen? And that is the point we made a while ago. In other words, to say that they could have stolen is really just to say maybe they weren't convicted enough. But again, the problem would be, why would they stand up to persecution? Why would they consider themselves as willing to even give up their lives? Why would they consider themselves to be immortal? Why would they do? I mean, if one guy does that, that's fine. People who have all sorts of weird ideas. Why would they do in mass scale? And there too, the other important point is, note carefully the persecution. Remember I said earlier that I come back to the in Jerusalem again. Yeah? If you look at mythologies carefully, there are mythologies in the world. Some people are really convicted about even mythologies. But if you go through mythologies carefully, one of the important traits in a myth would be that the origin of the myth would not be accessible to you. You won't be able to go verify. You see what I'm saying? Or such and such God did such and such things during his time in this garden or whatever. People may take it seriously. Oh yeah, okay, I'm a religious man, I take this seriously. The point is, if you talk about that particular guy is living next door, died and came back alive, what would people do? Even these people giving to myths might say, okay, which next door? That guy, okay, let me go and check. You see what I'm saying? The moment you talk about church willing to go through what they're going through, at the origin of where these events happened, at the place where the events happened, Jesus' death, burial and so on, the normal human reaction would be, let me go and check. Either directly or indirectly, I'll do some level of checking. You see what I'm saying? In other words, myths don't have that trait in them. Yeah, consider any myth that you can think of. For example, the Egyptian idea that pharaohs live in the hereafter and they take whatever wealth from us and so on. Okay, what credible narration is given to support that claim from the point of where the claim came out? You see what I'm saying? We saw this pharaoh go in and therefore we are claiming this. Is that how those claims are made? No. They just claim this guy dies and becomes something else. It will be vague. The place of origin won't be available for you to go and check either in terms of time or in terms of location. That would be an important trait for a myth, but that is not the case here. In Jerusalem, in the place where Jesus was crucified, Calvary is not, is simply outskirts of Jerusalem, sort of. When I say outskirts, I'm talking about even the inner city, sort of thing. Calvary is part of, it's not far away, it's not 50 miles away, it's not 100 miles away, it's right there. So the point is, the narration here has an important trait which is against myth, which is the place is accessible for the people who can have access. First century people are in Jerusalem, which is the first century place. In terms of time, in terms of geography, location, it's all accessible. That's where the thing came out of. You see what I'm saying? That's pretty much like me saying, there is a guy next door, he is God because he died and came back alive. Okay, now the only thing left is, we just started with the other explanations possible. One is the stealing of the body, doesn't work. And a couple of other, there are all sorts of other, maybe 5 or 6 other things tried, but all of them would fail in a particular way, which is, let's say, consider 2 other examples. One is what is called swoon theory, which is maybe Jesus never died. Maybe he was just badly bruised and beaten like Tyson Fury. Getting up on round 12 in his first meeting with Deontay, like he did, Jesus just came back. And that's what people thought was resurrection. Okay, well, you're fooling them. You're fooling who? Roman executioners got it wrong? Is that what you're saying? Who are you now? Are you any better than the Roman executioner? You see what I'm saying? Even the best experts today, let's say medical doctors or whoever, testified for the fact that someone died, would only be comparable to them in terms of skill. But in terms of access, they are better. They were there in person. So they knew what they were doing. So you're fooling them. So now it's undermining what was established to be a historical fact. You're doing that, swoon theory, and then let's go to this one, empty tomb. Okay, badly beaten, bruised, but still was inside a tomb which was sealed after a stone was put in place with Roman guards outside. How did he go through the 3-level protection? Especially given the fact that he is just recovering from being badly bruised. You see what I'm saying? How did he push the stone away? But still there was a seal. How do you take the seal away before you can even attempt to push? But even if you manage to do both those, what did you do to the Roman soldiers? None of those can hold water. But this might hold. People can, of course, if he was never dead and if he comes back alive, he can show. But the fact of the matter is, those 2 are undermined. Any explanation should have all 3 upheld properly. You see what I'm saying? Any possible explanation should hold all of these things properly. Died, buried, the tomb was empty, he showed up. Well, he showed up. You can even flex it enough to say maybe it wasn't a bodily visitation. But regardless, you still need to show some evidence of why people thought he showed up alive to them. Because they were willing to die for it. So I mean, swoon theory. What's the other theory I wanted to consider today?
Islamic one, that someone else was putting Jesus Christ.
So we'll come to that in a minute. We'll come to that in a minute. I'll just make some. One second, please. So the other theory I wanted to consider briefly. I mentioned about swoon theory, hallucination theory. Well, of course, hallucination theory is about the witnesses, all of them were hallucinated. They just thought he showed up alive, they didn't. Okay, well, to claim that all of them could be fooled at the same time is already an overkill. But let's go with you for a moment. How did the hallucination make the tomb empty? Hallucinations don't make tombs empty. You can't think a body out of a tomb. You can move a body out of a tomb. You can do anything else physically to a body in the tomb to an extent it's no longer in the tomb. But you really can't think for it to be out of the tomb. You see what I'm saying? That won't hold water. And so the point, so that's another idea, another explanation, another example. But if you take any other theory, I think when I was writing this, I went through a number of theories which were perpetrated. The fact of the matter is, all of those theories go against at least one of these points. And when it goes against even one of these points, it's not a valid explanation. With that having said, we are going to wrap up. We already beyond our allotted time. Any question or comment right now? Yes, Brother Rajay.
Yeah. So, two questions really.
Yeah. Yeah. Two questions.
Yeah, both related. The two questions are, were there any other gods besides the Roman gods there? In other words, were there any gods from, like, say, the Jewish faction?
I wouldn't think so. There's no indication of any such thing.
Right, okay. Then the other question is, what happened to the Roman gods? I mean, is there any place that says, well, because they were not there when the tomb was empty. What happened to them? Is there any record or history of what actually happened to them? Or do we not know that? Because
no, we don't. Okay, so no, let me answer this carefully. Was there? And the first question, I'd like to come back to that again, please. Did the Jews have their own representation? No, they didn't, and that's a huge statement. When they don't have their own representation, even though they didn't like this guy, and certainly they knew that he spoke about resurrection, and therefore there could be all sorts of things that could happen for the tomb to go empty, they still didn't have a representation, and that to us tells us how reliable the Romans were. The Jews were confident enough with the Roman apparatus, sort of doing their job there. Point one. Now coming to the second question, which is what happened to them. Firstly, what would happen to them? And here's where people have studied. I personally haven't done first-hand research on this from first principle, looking at Roman records of military discipline. But what I've heard second-hand from other people, second-hand is that they say the way in which they guard in situations like this is very, very comprehensive. There will be a number of soldiers involved. They'll take turns. Essentially, this is 24/7 duty.
Yes. And
at any point in time, there will be a representative. How many I can't remember, whether it's two or not, I can't remember. But there will be a reasonable representation of the entire group. And if something goes wrong, the entire group pays for it.
Yes.
That's the level of expectation from there. And the paying for it in this case would be perhaps even their own lives. Because seriously, the Roman apparatus is, the reputation of the Roman apparatus is at stake here. A very popular case. Jesus is a very popular man in the entire land. And so, So that's point number one. Serious things could have happened to them, potentially. But what we find is, I think it is the book of Matthew. I can't remember which gospel talks about this. But if I were to guesstimate, I think it will be the book of Matthew, where it actually goes on to suggest what the Jewish leadership did. They essentially told the soldiers, don't worry, we'll pay you. Can you please just say, disciples told the body? Just that should be your official account. So they were willing to pay for it, and they were willing to also use their influence. The Jewish leaders would have an influence which is slightly different from the Roman soldiers. Roman soldiers were just employees, or not in a loose sense. They're just working for the Roman apparatus, whereas Jewish leadership would have political power also. Because Rome didn't want unnecessary disturbances in any part of the world. They are already too busy, got plenty of work, and so on. So with that in mind, they could have had clout, and they essentially said, we pay for. How did things, what things happened after that? Not quite sure. What happened to those particular soldiers? Not quite sure. What's happening?
Switched off.
Oh, switched off.
I'm not sure.
Okay, anyway, nothing in a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
maybe heat. Okay, so that's the deal. Particularly what happened, we don't know. What we do know is that certainly no alternative hypothesis was advanced to an extent it took root anywhere.
Yes.
So the only historical explanation given for this is that Jesus came back alive. Beyond that, silence.
Yes.
Any other question or on the live chat, on our WhatsApp chat, training chat?
It's an argument from Muslims at Park.
Oh yes, sorry.
Which is, I think it's linked to post-burial appearances. And they quote the passage where it reads that the saints left the tomb and they were like zombies walking around Jerusalem. And so they basically, their argument is that, okay, so where are the eyewitnesses for that particular?
So I'll go back to a statement which I made. I'm not sure if I made that at the right time, but that's a principle which we need to properly bear in mind, which is some portions of the scriptures we can verify ourselves, by ourselves. I mean, we can go to the first principles based analysis, go check out witness accounts and then verify and then be confident of. And based on those, we come to the conclusion that the biblical God is God. And then once we come to that particular conclusion, then we go on to say some other portions which we couldn't verify earlier, like the talking snake, like all other stuff, including what happened to these saints who showed up at the point of the crucifixion and who went around at the point of resurrection and so on. What happened to them? We really don't know. The fact of the matter is, we really can't verify that first time also. In other words, that's not the entry point for us into the first century resurrection account. And that would have no bearing on what we're talking about. If 100 people showed up, how many we don't know, it says many. If 100 people showed up at different points in time to people who were really convinced resurrection was very real, therefore, the resurrection of Jesus was very real. Their focus would still be on Jesus. And therefore, they wouldn't be writing huge accounts of the other people. But they, of course, had taken the trouble to mention about the other people. Now, this is mainstream Jews in the first century. As for the rest, if they wanted to ignore the resurrection of Lazarus, if they wanted to ignore the resurrection of Jesus, hide it under the carpet. Push it under the, sweep it under the carpet. Why would they talk about this? So, in other words, I wouldn't expect them to talk about this. So, I don't find a problem with the other saints sort of walking around, and for that, not much evidence outside of the Bible to be present. In regards to the Muslim argument, I'd really like to quickly say, unless there is any other question on the chat.
Yeah.
Very small about
These are on our chat, training chat. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
What's that?
Okay. The question was like if you can give your thoughts on the verse John 16:7.
Thoughts on the verse of John 16:7.
Why is it more advantageous for the Holy Spirit to be here with us rather than the presence of our Lord Jesus?
Okay, so John 16. So this is of course about the Comforter, the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And the point, nevertheless, I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I go away. For I do not go away. For if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you. But if I depart, I will send him to you. Okay, so that's a good question. But I think it has a wrong assumption. If people are thinking that what Jesus is saying is really Holy Spirit is the better person to help you, the answer is that's not what he is saying. And that needs to be made clear. So the point that Jesus is saying is not that Holy Spirit is better. The point that Jesus is rather saying is, I have my stuff to do, he has his stuff to do. Now that I have done my stuff, the one who still needs to do his stuff is the Holy Spirit of God, and therefore his work is the more important thing right now, if you see what I mean. His contribution is the necessary contribution to advance from where I have left to where the church needs to go. That's what Jesus was saying. That's why he's saying it's better if I go for him, it is to your advantage. Yep. Any other question at all? Okay, the Muslim argument, do we deal with it briefly?
Yeah.
Okay, the Muslim argument has multiple problems. What is the Muslim argument? Muslim argument is
Judas was in the cross.
he never was killed, it was someone else. It has multiple issues. Issue number one, and they claim this to be a miracle, by the way. Issue number one, well, okay, in that case, I'm going to show a miracle now. Yeah, if anyone wants to see a miracle, I'm going to show a miracle now. You see Brother Raju there, sitting there? Just carefully watch him. He's sitting there, yeah? Can you all see him? It's still him?
Yeah.
But at the count of 3, I'm going to do something. You know what that is?
No.
I'm going to replace him with someone who looks exactly like him. To an extent you won't even know it's someone else. You see, and it doesn't matter what he says. I don't care what he says. I just want you to all consider the thing properly. I'm going to change him. He might claim he is the same old one, but that is not true. Yeah, that's the miracle I'm going to do. 3, 2. Sister Susan is trying to protect him as much as possible. But 3, 2, 1. Miracle still has happened.
Okay.
Miracles. Yeah, it has happened. Did you see that?
It's a different
It's
person.
a different person, but that looks the same.
He looks the same.
He looks the same, obviously. That's the miracle here. I have some. Brother Raju has helped me at multiple points in time, so I really want to show gratitude to him. So I'm really saying, you know what, he has suffered enough today with the lengthy sessions. So I'm going to give him rest. Now it's someone else.
Can you bring me back?
Okay.
Can you bring me back?
I can do that any number of times. That's the thing that they're talking about, which is a bit silly. If that is the kind of claim a person, anyone wants to advance, bear in mind, anyone can claim that at any point in time, with no bearing, with any claim made by the person involved, have any bearing on it. It doesn't matter what Brother Raju said, it doesn't matter what Jesus said after he came back, doesn't matter what the neighbors or friends, none of those things matter. All that matters is what I said. It's someone like him, looks like him, breathes like him, after the count, after the miracle, someone exactly like him. As a matter of fact, if you really were thinking, no, it seems too much like him that it's just him, you just need to be wary of the fact that that's the perfection of my miracle. Exactly like him, no one would doubt. That's the flaw. This is a silly thing to do, and to call it a miracle is a joke.
It's a scientific miracle, isn't it? They cloned. they had cloning technology back then.
Possibly that also. So that's one problem with this. If that is what we deal with, anyone can do the same miracle any number of times. Number one. And are you willing to put up with that nonsense? Number one. Number two is the fact that historically speaking, this is again foolishness. Because if you talk about just secular history level idea, the idea is who is better to talk about him? Oh, well, the people who are near him. He himself and the people who are near him. And those accounts we know of, which are in the Bible, and they contradict you. So your ideas is just historic, purely secular history-wise, just rubbish, wrong. Don't go around passing this idea, otherwise you'll be mocked. That's point. It's purely from a historical perspective. Of course, which they don't do, because they bring in their sophisticated theological perspective. Oh, we believe this is true because Islamic Allah has said this. Islamic Allah. Now, let's for a moment pretend this is the same, this is the Islamic Allah is the God of the Bible. We have fundamental problems, which is God of the Bible said He came back alive. So the one who you think said He didn't was the one who first said He did. For that to be not true, you tell me when precisely you are, number one, God of the Bible, the same God, according to you, which I don't think, it's not the same God, by even miles, it's polar opposites in my view. But for a moment, if we consider that to be true, the problem is, God of the Bible, the same God according to you says both contradictory statements in Quran versus in the Bible. Whereas when for obvious reasons, there are reasons to say they are not the same God. And the one who is talking from the Bible has shown evidences for the fact that He is God. The guy who you think spoke to your own guide never did have any evidence. So you are revising God's own statements based on what merit? Based on no supernatural merit, even though you are calling into supernatural reasons to justify what you're trying to say. There is only one loophole here, one remote loophole, not a credible loophole, one remote loophole, which is to say, oh, the Bible is corrupt, God of the Bible never said that to begin with. Well, in that case, I'd like to again go to available evidences. We have all the evidences to suggest that's what we saw, the manuscriptal variants, no bearing. We have all the evidences, take all the manuscripts put together, we know what it said. The corruption that you're talking about, what evidence is there for the corruption you have in mind? It's simply nonsense. See what I'm saying? So that's another area. Theologically speaking, the problem is the resurrection is a cornerstone in the biblical account. Is a core principle right through the biblical account. And this is where sacrifice, how the Messiah becomes a sacrifice. This is not just one passage, one event, not even 1 year, one week, but really we're talking about centuries of what God said. And now you come and say suddenly things have changed from the same God. On what basis do we take you seriously? And add to that, the idea is there is every reason to doubt Islam on every single level. And one of those crucial levels is Islamic Allah is not Yahweh. And therefore, multiple reasons, this is flaky work. Just maybe add one more thing to that. If you read the construct of the verse in the Quran, they killed him, not crucified him. That construct, by the way, Islam stole. It's not even original Islamic construct. That comes from much earlier. I remember I said there were a few different heresies advanced right from the 2nd century. And one of the heresies advanced was Docetism. There were multiple arguments advanced. How can God die? Maybe it wasn't God. Maybe he didn't really die. So all sorts of conjectures were advanced. And one of the conjecture advanced is this based on this principle called docetism. You really can't kill God. So if you thought you killed God, it can't be really God. You thought it was God, but it's not God. So it's not Jesus you killed. That's the idea advanced, and that's where the expression "you killed him not, neither you crucified him" essentially communicates that mindset, which is very popular in the Arabic heartland. If you go, so this is where if we study the Ebionites and some of the rejected Gospels, which are later documents, which we'll deal with in great level of detail, reasonable level of detail in one of our future modules. If we go through those documents, we find these ideas began there in the Arabic heartland. By that I don't mean Saudi Arabia, I mean Edom, Petra, and so on. Some of the ideas being advanced these days, and so to suggest that it is anything else apart from just borrowing that particular idea is really not doing justice to the historical context. So on multiple levels it's just flaky, which is fine because Islam is flaky. The right place for Islam, Muslims are wonderful, not for their religion but as people. God loves human beings, anyone, everyone. The word of God makes it quite clear. God does not desire the death of even the wicked. So even if you are Hitler, if you go around killing hundreds of people, God would still want to save you. And so they need to be saved. They are wonderful people purely for the sake of the fact that they are descendants of human beings who are made in the image of God. We need to treasure them. But Islam as an ideology, in terms of its historicity, in terms of its theological foundation, and so on, the only place it belongs to is just wherever you won't go to, maybe Bin or wherever. Just check it out. It doesn't help anyone. It's not true. It's not historically valid. Don't use it. People have used it in the past, but put it in the bin. Not relevant anymore. At least now, the billion-plus Muslims need to wake up. Yeah? Okay, sounds good. Okay, shall we close there? Thank you. Thank you for being a very good crowd here. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for the interaction. Thank you for the support shown by even carefully listening for such a long time. But hopefully we're doing this for the glory of God. Those in the online stream also, I'm not sure how many are still in the live stream, but hopefully we're doing this for the glory of God through God's grace. Next steps, I'm hoping to give assessments sooner rather than later for module 2, so people can have a bit longer time to study things and fill in assessment sheets and so on. And apart from that, questions and answers session on the 4th Saturday, online. Live streaming alone, 4th Saturday, but brother here who hasn't gone through the registration process because of my mistake, apologies, would be taken through the process carefully, so you get to know about these in a timely manner. So that's the plan. Thank you very much for your time. Shall we close in prayer, please?
Yes.
Yeah. Did someone else want to pray, please? Someone, please.
Lord, we just thank you for this valuable time together, that we can grow in truth, that we can sharpen each other. We thank you for all that Lord has prepared and shared. Just ask that you just guide our witness of you, that we will grow in you, that we will grow in telling others about you and making disciples, Lord. As we all go from here, we pray your protection over us, keep us in your peace, your love, your joy, and keep us in the unity of your Spirit, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you.